We do have some new information that we'd like to share this afternoon, that several of the Belgian terror suspects were known to the Belgian and also European authorities since the Paris attacks. And now the bombings do reveal vulnerabilities in overall security. Just last week, police arrested alleged Paris attacker Salah Abdeslam during a raid in the Brussels neighborhood of Molenbeek.
The arrest comes 4 months after the attacks in France. And now there's growing security concerns not only in Europe, but also here in the United States. Earlier, we talked to Joby Warrick, a national security reporter for The Washington Post, about the growing security threat.
Well, Belgium has a problem, and they know it. It's a resource problem. They don't have nearly the kind of manpower that you need to take care of a problem like this. It's also a cultural problem. This is a country that doesn't conduct police raids after dark, except in extreme situations. So this is a country that wasn't really prepared, and they know it.
And did ISIS identify those weaknesses, and that is why they targeted this particular area to grow their base?
They certainly went to school on the security situation there. They knew where the vulnerabilities were, and they attacked those pretty precisely. But this is also a country that, as we've seen, has a very large, ethnic, North African and Islamic community. It's fairly insular. It doesn't mix very well with the rest of the society. And as your previous guest said, it's provided a lot of jihadists to Syria and to Iraq in the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking hundreds of people. They almost call it a pipeline to jihad. But in that way, it seems like there's almost been a new strategy shift where some of these foreign fighters who usually go to war and stay in the country are now boomeranging back, coming back to the country. Is this a shift to focus on building and encouraging terror cells and foreign fighters and to try to recruit more people in Belgium?
Well, it certainly was a surprise to a lot of us, but it isn't entirely new. Even back in 2013, 2014, we saw jihadists talking about attacks on the West. Some of it was just aspirational, but it turns out that all along they were, planting the seed. Some of these people who are being recruited into, to ISIS to fight in Syria and Iraq are being sent back very deliberately to carry out these kinds of actions. So it's really not a surprise in that sense. But again, as we've seen, security officials aren't ready for it.
Joby, ISIS did say yesterday that they do plan more attacks and they will be more gruesome. Since we now have identified here in this discussion some of the weaknesses, do we need to concentrate then on that? But then what else? How do we get ahead of this?
Well, I think the first mission, while we're trying to tighten up in terms of our own security, is the problem in the Middle East. This caliphate that's developed. It's essentially a sanctuary for some really bad actors. They've got all kinds of resources. They've got amazing wealth, weapons, the ability to kind of plan and project power from that region. And so before, really the job one has to be to shut down that caliphate and make sure that ISIS doesn't have this victory to be able to crow about, that they have this. They've created this state. It's a magnet for all kinds of jihadists around the world, and it's also a sanctuary for them to launch other attacks around the world.
Discussion of the Muslim community, Joby, has been a topic in our political presidential race. Some Republican candidates really want to tamp down on the Muslim community and add surveillance, saying that they feel as though that this will cut down on some of the radical Islam that may be growing here in the United States. But do you believe that this is apples and oranges, that the Muslim community here in America versus the Muslim community in Europe are just two completely different things?
I think it's absolutely true that whenever we divide ourselves, whenever we make this a West versus Islam, it definitely plays into ISIS's just right into their playbook, because they've been saying over and over again that their intention in carrying out these attacks is to go after what they call a gray zone, go after Muslims and force them essentially to join their side, force a backlash, force governments to crack down on Muslims and make them feel more alienated so they're more likely to join their movement. This is what they really want, and it's the worst thing that can really happen from our point of view.
When you talk about the neighborhood, Molenbeek, it's a very divided neighborhood, so many different languages spoken. Economically, it has really not done well. Very poverty, there's discrimination there. We see that in some of the neighborhoods here in the United States, Minneapolis in particular, but there are places in California, San Diego, New York, Michigan. Are there things that we should be watching from what happened in Belgium? Should we be learning from that, and how do we address it in our communities here in the United States?
Yeah, we absolutely need to watch it. But I think what's interesting in this country is that you see radical individuals and radicalized individuals, but you don't really see this problem of radical communities. And there are exceptions. There are things that obviously are on our radar screen we have to worry about. But we really need Muslims themselves to be part of the solution and to be watching each other and making sure that they're taking care of extremists and radicals that emerge within their midst. But we certainly need them on our side.